Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the InkPod Podcast. Today, we're here with Ian West, who is the president of Monarch Color. Thanks for joining today, Ian.
Yeah, how you doing, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty good. It's a Friday, long weekend, so
got Labor Day,
let's
Monday
end it off on a
off.
good note. Have some fun, maybe not so much
Absolutely.
business, just talk shop for a little bit. So
I always
kinda
say
makes
that, and
sense.
it never happens, right? I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
get the emails, the phone calls, everything, but yeah, hopefully some time off, right?
You guys are off too in the States, obviously, right?
Yep, Monday off, and then we're back at it Tuesday. Busy season, so.
Cool, awesome. So, Ian, if you don't mind, just talk a little bit about yourself and kind of how you ended up in the industry, and also maybe touch a little bit on the history of Monarch Color. As I know, Plastisol is not where you guys started, and I think, big picture, if you look at your company history as a whole, it's kind of a new product line for you guys, if I'm not mistaken. So if you don't mind just introducing yourself to our listeners who are
that's
not familiar
absolutely
with
correct.
yourself or Monarch Color.
Yeah. So Ian West with Monarch Color. I'm the president, have been president as of just this year, actually. We started in 1977. It was actually my grandfather who started the business. And at the time, we were exclusively in the offset industry, offset printing, so oil-based offset printing for packaging. Pretty much anything that was printed back then was printed with offset. From there, we kind of, shifted around Charlotte, got into a couple different locations, went over to, some water-based flexo materials. That is sort of the cheaper alternative to offset in the packaging, direct mailer, all that stuff. From there, we started getting into UV curables, and that kind of led us into screen printing. So people were printing a lot of political signs with UV curable inks. These were kind of the consistency of a traditional water-based ink that you would find out there. And that is where we sort of got the expertise and the technology that ultimately led us to developing screen printing inks. That process started in 2016 for Plastisol inks. So very, very new in the industry in comparison to most of the guys out there. We started that with wanting to sort of create there were a lot of products in that sort of lower to middle tier range, and we wanted to create something that wasn't just the same thing as what everybody already had. We wanted to come at the market with a relatively new technology, or at least one that hadn't quite taken off yet. And our first ink we ever developed was a low temp ink. And that sort of was very much targeted at the apparel decoration for like BSN printers or 100% polyester garments or people doing sportswear. At the same time, you had One Stroke, who was having some pretty good success in that market, particularly in the United States, doing things a little bit differently, selling direct. They were the kings of that market, of the low temp athletic apparel decoration industry. And that was basically the standard that we had to achieve. We had to, new guy in town, no brand recognition. Nobody had heard of us. So how do we create a product that is better, that is different, that is, servicing a part of the market that is either underserviced or not serviced at all? So we came out with our first low temp. That was the ULT1. Got it out into a bunch of shops, got it tested, and sort of fine-tuned it from there. And it's kind of where most people start with Plastisol. Is you start with a white. If you can develop a white, get a good printable, highly opaque white, you sort of develop the colors from that point. Creating color is a science. It's definitely difficult, but creating the backbone of the formulation, a product that actually functions and works as it should, is what is the most difficult. And what is everybody looking for? Well, what kind of white do you have? What's your best white? How opaque with it? How bright is it? Is it a cooler white? Is it a blue white? Is it a warm white? So that's how we started. From there, we sort of expanded everything that we offer, into servicing all of the market, from the top to the bottom. We still maintain that, all of our products are going to be, high quality products, made well, made consistently, batch to batch consistency in terms of color, in terms of performance. That's what we're always striving to bring to the table. We're not just throwing stuff in a bucket and shipping it out. We take pride in everything that we ship out. But that's kind of how we got started. We started at the top and tried to make whatever the best product we possibly could, and then sort of backwards engineered down to sort of more economic options and into the standard cure and blending systems and all the stuff that everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
And I heard you guys.
And I think
go ahead, Zach. It's fine.
What I was mentioning is that you kind of looked at the market opportunity of one stroke and how they came out with a product that worked really well with low temp. And I think they've done a really good job. Unfortunately, unfortunately or fortunately for me, we haven't really seen much of it up in Canada. It doesn't seem like there's a distributor out there that's selling the product. And I like I said, I think you had mentioned that they kind of sell direct. It's their strategy.
Yep.
That being said, going after that business, they've always been really expensive, to my understanding. I don't know if that's just within the Canadian market or if it's the same in the US. So, going after that market and trying to be a little bit more price sensitive, I think obviously bears a big opportunity. And to your point of, starting with the white, I mean, not because that's what everyone's kind of always looking for, but that's where the volume is. I mean, if you look at your annual spend, Shawn, I'm sure I don't know, it's probably 80% white. So
at least
you got to make sure your whites, kick ass before you start even working on anything else, because that's where you're going to make the money, and that's where people are going to follow you. And if they see that, hey, these guys have a good white, they're going to give you a shot on the colors. And I think I saw in a previous podcast with the Shirt Show and Aaron, who used to be with Monarch and actually got us rolling with you guys. He had really talked about how the way that you guys develop inks is kind of more like an old school method, but comes with a lot of its benefits, and also is different from the majority of the players in the industry. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all, but I think that could be kind of interesting to chat about.
Yeah, that's 100%, 100% correct. And you were right about, one stroke being a little more expensive, but you get a good product. I'm nothing bad to say about one stroke at all. They make a great product. It definitely works, but that's kind of what we had to do was come down on price, offer something that could perform the way that it was, and then come down on price a little bit and be a little more competitive in that market through, as I'm sure you guys know, economies of scale. You buy more, you pay less. So, but yeah, we do still have a very, very old school approach to manufacturing and quality control and research and development. We come from an industry in which we basically match everything through X-ray spectrophotometry, and that's a requirement. That's not something that we just do for fun. That's an expense that comes with it. It's got to be renewed every year. The software is expensive. The instruments are expensive. But that's why we have the color consistency that we have. Is we read everything that we ship out of this building through an X-ray spectrophotometer. So if you get moon blue or vivid red or gold yellow last year and you don't order it again for another year, you're getting exactly the same color. I mean, there's going to be, you can throw that gallon into a live job and switch gallons in the middle of it, and you're going to notice no difference in color. And that's what we wanted to achieve, because that's the exact situation that we run into in offset and water-based flexo. People are switching over in live jobs constantly. There's no getting away from doing that in that industry. So while that's maybe a little less common in screen printing, it's still something that happens, and we wanted to bring that level of quality and that level of attention to detail over to screen printing to kind of, okay, well, these guys do things differently. These guys offer something that I'm not currently getting somewhere else. Because we didn't have the name recognition. I already touched on that before. We were the new guys. So, everything that we do is by design. It's very intentional. It's 2024, and we're well known in the industry now. We still got a very long way to go, though. We've got a lot of things that we're working on, a lot of things that we want to do, not just, from our products, but from an educational standpoint. So we had to bring that sort of, that old school approach to making products, make it as good as you possibly can, and then figure out the costs later. It'll work itself out if you can show somebody, okay, this is a more expensive product because of everything that we have to do that goes into it, not just the material, but the research and development, the quality control, the people that I've got to hire, the equipment, all that stuff. But this is how it's going to make your life so much easier. If you have to, if you take this color and you don't have to stop a job because, oh, dang, the color's slightly different, I need to tint it or something like that. Or you take it to press and you're like, okay, I'm having to hit this one 3 times instead of 2, somebody that, you can trust that doesn't throw a wrench in the situation and make your job more difficult when you've gone out and done this elaborate SOP to make everything as consistent as possible. And then, oh crap, here's a product that is not the same as it was last time. Now I got to stop and figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was something that was really big for us, especially with water-based inks. Like you were talking about how right into a job, you switch inks, and the viscosity of like water-based inks, it differs because of humidity, because of palette temperatures, because of all that. So it would always have, I'd call it, somebody would just come and feed, right, more ink into the screen to make sure that we keep the same consistency and density of the ink. But we would always mix an extra bucket on the side that, even though we didn't think we were going to use it, it's just a backup, right?
Yep.
If for some reason the client comes back 6 months later, at least we have the exact same color that are mixed and it's closed out. So even though we switched to Plastisol after the Avian podcast and we're mixing Plastisol and water-based inks now and we're doing both, we still have that mentality of like, hey, we have 2 jars of inks, then we're probably going to mix them both together just because in our mind it's like humidity is affected to it. But like the way you're talking, maybe your SOPs are like too hard for Plastisol or too intensive, right?
Yeah.
Which is even better.
But for sure. It definitely, that's one of the reasons that, printing with Plastisol is a little bit easier than water-based. Everybody hears it dries on the screen, and I'm sure it does, but there's precautions you can take to mitigate that and make it a lot easier. And once you're doing it, it's fine. It's no problem. But one other, maybe underrated aspect of Plastisol is what we call the in-can stability. You go use, say you use a color in January and you just set it off to the side and you don't touch it again for 7 or 8 months. Should you give it a little mix? Yeah, fine. But you're not going to have separation. You're not going to have a lot of the stuff that you deal with water-based inks because they just don't have the suspension that a thicker, higher centipoi viscosity Plastisol product will have. So that's another underrated aspect. If you really wanted to, you could walk over to that Plastisol bucket, stick an ink knife in it, slap it on your screen, give it a couple strokes across it, and you're done. It's easy to print with, and that's one thing that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think another one of the approaches that you guys took was kind of the less is more. And what I mean by that is you don't have a lot of white SKUs, right? You got your standard cure Stark, which is also your mixing white in the Vivid system. And then you got your low cure Yeti, which is also the mixing white in the Apocalypse system. Then you have your ULT3, which is your 100% poly. And then we kind of bugged you for 6 months to create what we ended up calling the Snow White, which was just like a down and dirty, cheap ink to compete with my, low cost competitors in Canada who are making ink themselves. And that's actually done quite well for us as well. Yeah. So I think you guys said, hey, we don't want to be like everyone else where we have, 5 low cures and 5 standard cures. And the fact, and I don't think that that's common. I don't know, maybe you'll know better. But I haven't seen, I don't think, an ink mixing system where the production white is the same as your mixing white. Did you have to do something different for that to actually work? And like, why would you not see that everywhere with all mixing systems if it's easy? Because it's just one less white. The perfect scenario for every shop is, and I see it sometimes, like, I only want one white. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to have to go with a general purpose, low cure, and it's going to kind of do a pretty good job, hopefully, on most polys, but not really. Like, you can't have that one white. If that existed, there would only be one ink company, whoever gets to that first, and everyone else can kind of get wiped out. Right. So what did you guys have to do to make that work, where your production white was the same as your mixing white? Because customers love that.
Yes. I mean, what it ultimately comes down to, because most of our mixing colors, because our mixing colors are highly opaque. That's the way we manufacture it. We didn't want translucent, mixing colors. We didn't want somebody taking this to a black fabric and suddenly your color shift is 5-10 PMS colors. We wanted highly opaque mixing colors. So using the production white in that application was really pretty easy. It didn't require much except making sure that we have very little shift in our in the viscosity of that product. And what I mean by that is, as you know, our mixing system, each one of those colors individually is also a printable color as well. All of those are finished ink. So if you had mixing yellow shade red, you could just print with the mixing yellow shade red if you want. So those are already at production viscosities. So we were limited in how high we could take the viscosity of our white so as not to create this very viscous final product when you go mixing in white with the colorants that you need. But it really didn't come out to that much of a challenge, because if that's where you start with your white, which is where we were, then you just match all the formulas using that white and everything falls in line from there. But you're 100% right. We did not want to create a list of 15 different whites of ours that you had to choose from. It's too much. It gives people option paralysis. They get them mixed up. If you got to carry 5 or 6 whites on your shelf at your shop, if you got press operators, say you don't have an SOP like you do, Shawn, you take it over there, some guy grabs the wrong bucket, put it on the wrong application. You put a ULT or a polyester ink on a 50/50 garment, it feels like sandpaper. And you're like, what the heck happened? Well, we used the wrong white. So we tell basically everybody, and this is not just our whites, but it's all products, that, everything that we offer is available in standard cure temp and low cure temp. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. If you want bold red, you can get a low temp version of it, or you can get a standard cure temp version of it. And that's, aside from our ULT color, that's as simple, or ULT white, that's as simple as it gets. It's just, it's easier for the customer to call us and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is the kind of shop I run. This is the setup I have. What kind of product should I be running? Okay, if you're a low temp shop, let's go with the Apocalypse colors and Yeti white. If you're a standard cure temp shop and you're printing cottons or 50/50s, okay, you might have to have 2 whites there. You might have to have the 100% cotton white and the blend white, but still, that's 2 options to choose from. Just keep the 2 separated, and it's pretty easy to keep that in line. What we didn't, and where it comes from is I think you guys can probably appreciate what causes some, manufacturers to do that. You get a lot of customer feedback, right? People calling you and saying, hey, this white's just not working for me. If it was XYZ, then that would be perfect. Okay, well, let's create that white. And obviously, it's not one instance of this. It's several customers calling you over a long period of time saying, hey, I can't do this, or I can't do this, or I can't do this with it. And we'll just make another white. All right, well, that happens, and suddenly you've got 3 or 4 whites. And the same thing happens with a few other customers. Okay, well, let's make a white for that particular application. So what we what we wanted to, most, I guess, feedback we get from customers or complaints or where we release a product and say, hey, this is a new white that we've got, go out and try it. XYZ customer comes back and says viscosity is too high. XYZ customer 2 comes back and says viscosity is too low. All right, what do you guys want me to do with this feedback right here, right? We've got one saying too high, one saying too low. So we tend to sort of opt on a little bit of the higher scale of the viscosity, and then let you customize it down to where you want it to be. What is a printable viscosity for you? If you're on a manual press, if you're on an automatic press, if you're running 70 durometer squeegee, triple durometer squeegee, whatever it might be, give them the tools to be able to customize that product, because you're not lifting a viscosity of a product back up. Once it's down, it's down. That's where it is. So it's all about, responding to customer, not necessarily complaints, but feedback, but not coming up with, 30 different versions of the same product so that you can just, so that you can answer every single bit of feedback that you get.
No, I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? Education. I think that's where the next step you guys want to jump into. And that I've heard you guys build a really nice new print lab. Is that going to be for new education, things like that you want to build out? or is it just to enjoy and what you guys build and enjoy having a print lab and study and do your things there?
Honestly, it's a little bit of both actually. We're really excited about it on a sort of selfish personal standpoint because I'm a hands-on guy. I like to print. I like to be involved. I like to do this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really exciting for me to have this and ultimately what it is. And we've been wanting to do this for some time, and we got this space in our facility built out for it. Got a brand new 10-station Rock U that we just got installed last week actually.
Awesome.
Got the dryer installed now, doing some aesthetic stuff to finish it off and make it look nice, but it's going to be kind of threefold. So obviously it's going to be used very, very much for research and development, making, we've got equipment here. We've had equipment here. We've been able to print this whole time. This obviously you have to be able to do that to manufacture and create a product, but we wanted something newer. We wanted to be able to keep up and respond to what's changing and all the different. So when somebody calls us and says, "Hey, I'm doing this right here," we can duplicate that exact scenario and be like, "Okay, this is how you do that. This is how you achieve that result." But it's going to help us with research and development. It's going to help us, answer a lot of questions when feedback or complaints come in. It's just going to help us be, better at developing products for our customers, but it's also going to serve, in addition to that, as sort of an educational piece. So we're going to launch several video series, and it's going to touch on, some of it's going to touch on the products that we have. What does Stark White do for you? What can Yeti White do for you? What can ULT? Who uses this? Where does it come into play for your application? But also, how do you print 4-color process, right? How do you print wet on wet on a discharge underbase simulated process? Or, where should your flash go in line for this particular application? Or, how does a stampinator help your overall print, the overall feel, or whatever it might be? We're going to offer videos for that. We're going to offer training. If you use Monarch products, here you go. This is how you do it. We're going to take those videos and then wrap them kind of into QR codes, and then throw them on most of our labels. So that, Zach, about this. If you got a salesman that goes out and, they're hitting a bunch of accounts, so you tell them you want them to go in Alberta and hit as many accounts as they possibly can and just drop off samples because, everybody's busy and nobody's going to get to it right away. They're not going to remember what you told them. Hey, here's Stark White and here's Yeti White. Here's the difference between the two. Use this at a 15-degree squeegee angle, medium flood, medium print. Use this one at a 12-degree squeegee angle, fast flood, fast print, whatever. They're not going to remember all that information. So you leave them a sample and they finally get, okay, we got some downtime. Let's see what we can do on testing. Okay, what was the difference between these two products again? Scan that QR code and it takes you to a video and shows you exactly what that product does, how it runs, what it's good for and how to get the best result out of it. So it's all about, arming you guys, arming our customers, arming our distributors, the sales staff, everybody with tools that they need to make this as easy as possible. If somebody's interested in changing, the last thing they want is for it to be a difficult process, right? They want to either have a plug and play product or somebody that comes in and tells them exactly how to run this to get the best result. And hopefully, by the beginning of next year, we'll have that content available. We'll have that out there for them. We're going to do some series spotlighting some of our customers because I think the best sales tactic that you can get is a customer telling another customer about your product and how it works, right? So what can we do to get the people that we know are using our product? Okay, how does Monarch fit into your app? Why did you start with Monarch? How does it fit with you guys? What do you get out of this that you're not getting elsewhere? And sort of releasing those videos so that shops that might be set up similarly to them can look at it and be like, oh, you know what? That makes sense to me. That sounds awesome. Let's give these guys a try. Oh, I've got a sample here and I can go look at just kind of bringing everything all back in to make the process of identifying, okay, how do we get the best in our shop? And maybe it's Monarch, maybe it's not, but letting them know if you do these things, if you take these steps, if you follow these instructions and see how this works, you can plug it right into your existing process, and it's going to be, it's going to be totally fine. Everything's going to be great. So just making it easier on distributors, customers, us, everybody. You don't have to have as much, taking phone calls or how does this work? How does this work? Or setting up times for your salesman to keep hitting back into these accounts. Oh, are you going to test? Are you going to test? Have you tested? What did you think? Blah, blah, blah. Just making it as easy, the testing process as easy as possible.
I love it.
And that's so important. And one recommendation I would have for you, I literally remember when Aaron first started coming out here, was he had a couple shirts, but one of them was a red Nike polyester shirt, and it was printed with the Apocalypse yellow print flash print, no underbase, and it was opaque like crazy. It literally looked like vinyl. And I was asking Aaron, I'm like, hey, can I have this shirt? And he's like, no, I can't. There's only one. I'm like, but this is like such a good sales tool. Like, you have no idea. I take this to shops and I show them this, and they're going to be like mind blown. And there was another one that he had that it was a print, which we still have. It's like a Yeti in the sun. I think t-shirt guys, not t-shirt guys, Upstate Merch might have printed for you guys or something like that.
Right. Yep.
And we have those ones, luckily, because, I guess you were getting them to print the samples, now you can print your own. But I remember that one there, we looked at it under a loop, and like the lines were so clean. And that was something else that he had mentioned, which again, I don't know how valid this point is, but he had said, like, your ink set is one of the inks that have the lowest dot gain in the industry. So, when ink hits the shirt, you're holding those really, really crisp lines, which I've seen in inferior ink sets when I go to customers and they're printing with very, very fine text. Like, it doesn't look good. Now, I'm sure a part of that also is because maybe they don't know how to print, but, is there really something that's going on that's allowing you guys to keep that dot gain really low, which then gives you, again, another competitive advantage?
Yeah, it's really, in that regard, it's really about, there's two things there, and we touched on it a little bit before, and it's ink can stability is number one. How stable is the product? How much of a tendency does it have to want to try to spread out instead of hold its shape, which comes back to also the viscosity of the product. So, yeah, we definitely designed our products to be able to hold, and dot gain. One of the symptoms or side effects of it, a positive side effect of it, is that it does create very crisp lines. But as you guys know, so, the ink is only capable of doing so much. Most or a lot of that process comes into pre-press. Your EOM on your mesh. Using the right emulsion, using the right squeegee, right off contact. Having your registration down, all that stuff. I say it's, I was talking to Jesse from Matsui, not too long ago, and we were talking about hybrid printing and in particular, and we joke about it every time we talk, but the first thing that gets blamed when there's a problem is the ink. Every single time there's a problem with the ink. And, obviously sometimes, that's true, but so often it's, okay, what's your process like from start to finish? Let's walk through that. Let's see if we can find some possible problem areas before we just go reformulating ink or getting you guys, new product and just having the same thing happen all over again. So yeah, our products are, all of our products, particularly our low temp products, they have that really nice, what you call rebound viscosity, is when you agitate it with the squeegee and then it gets to the shirt, it wants to get back to its original viscosity very quickly instead of getting more flowy or laying out. Which gives you really crisp lines, gives you really good detail on simulated and 4-color process jobs or anything that you're doing with halftones.
Yeah, and you touched on hybrid printing there, which is something that we wanted to chat about. We recently had Ricky and Pierre from Press Time, which are, they're big advocates of your ink. They're constantly posting, and you guys are reposting, and we're reposting because they're doing really cool stuff.
Yep.
They did a lot of dialing in with the Matsui discharge bases along with your Vivid system, which is what they opted to go with. And they've created what they call their Eversoft print, and it's kind of what they've, made their name on. They're kind of hiding for a while how it was being done, but eventually enough people caught on. It's like, hey, secret's out kind of thing, right? And we started actually trying to get our customers to do that because just the hand feel you get is amazing. So touching on hand feel, is this a trend that you're seeing in the industry to try and achieve the softest hand feel possible with plastisol, instead of just going straight to water-based and trying to get that? Is that a big push you're seeing from your clients and distributors?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely getting more and more possible, and people are getting quite a bit more curious about it. Particularly just in the last 2 years. When we first got into this industry, is okay. Do you guys have a soft hand additive? Do you guys have a soft hand additive? How do we make our prints softer and softer and softer? And it always was achieved with an additive. That was basically the default position that everybody wanted to go to. But then you run into issues like you start adding, soft hand additive to a color, especially a dark color. You very quickly lose your opacity. You lose the color. You have shifts. There's a lot of things that go along with any additive whatsoever, that makes you, a little hesitant to go that route a lot of times. So people started asking, okay, how do we get a softer hand without switching to water-based, because water-based is scary, right? So people started shifting to higher mesh counts, and that'll get you a good way there, 230s, 305s and stuff. That'll get you a good way there. But when you do that, particularly when you print on a black shirt, you end up having to, pass it 1 or 2 or 3 times sometimes to develop enough color for it to be, for you to be able to sell the shirt. Nobody wants some dull yellow on a black shirt that looks awful. You still need to be bright and vivid. So you took that 305 mesh and you hit it 3 times, suddenly you're at the same ink deposit that you might have been with a 156 or something like that. So, okay, how do we do this? And people started saying, okay, does plastisol print on top of water-based, or does it print on top of discharge? The answer is yes. Now, can't go vice versa. You can't go the other way around, but you can print plastisol on top of water-based. And okay, so what's the most logical step? To print white down with water-based and print plastisol on top? Maybe, but you still have a little bit of a film there, a little bit of an ink deposit there with water-based. So let's discharge. Let's just get the dye out of the fabric and then start with basically a clean slate, almost like you're starting with a natural color, or if you used a discharge with a little bit of white in it, a white shirt. So that's when, people started saying, hey, we can see really awesome results. And discharge is a little easier to work with than just, the rest of water-based.
Right.
So people started getting a little more curious. Okay, well, if I just have to have one print head dedicated to water-based, surely I can keep up with that. That can't be that bad. So we have seen a shift of people, okay, let's put discharge down. Let's put plastisol on top to get the softest hand we possibly can. And in order to do so, you've got to print wet on wet. You want to, and as few stops as you possibly can in the press. You want wet on wet, which means you've got to have good dot gain to print simulated process, or these colors on top to keep your lines, hold your lines. You want as few hits as possible. You've got very fine mesh. We have been working, we had the class up there, Zack, at Avid, where we went over some of that. It was mostly water-based. We had that one big job where we did discharge under base with, I think, a 12 color Ninja Turtle job on top.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we ran 7 or 8 of them wet on wet, just all in a row, because we only had, I think we had two flashes, 3 flashes, and then the third flash was right before the trapping black at the end there. But we ran, I think it was 7 colors wet on wet, and we, Pierre actually is the one who helped us. He ran the press. I got to sit there and talk to him. He was talking about the Eversoft process that they have there and how much research and development they put into and time. And I was like, most shops just aren't willing to put forth that level of time, because you gotta stop production. You've got to have a press dedicated to just trying to get this process better and better and better. So, we want to, in conjunction with this print lab, really kind of hit that educational part of that very hard. We'll do the research and development for you. We will go in and print, extended color, wet on wet, simulated process on a discharge under base to really, show you how it's done, provide you a TDS with this process, basically a video version of a technical data sheet on this process, so that you can bring it into your shop. And hopefully at that point, the only thing that would be required is some fine tuning. But yeah, the soft hand is always the question that we get. How do we make this softer? How do we make this softer? Because that is one of the downsides of plastisol versus water-based, is you have a hand feel. There's not much way around it. Trends have kind of dictated in recent years that people are liking that a little more. The big, thick plastisol print on the heavyweight cotton tees, that's getting a little more trendy, but still, I think, as a whole, the greater market, people are going to continue to want that really soft hand.
Yeah, and I think the trend of like really soft hand comes from, you have DTG, DTF, HSA inks, and then you get retail market that are selling those types of shirts. So people want that, but then you get the streetwear that's more like a heavy shirt with heavy plastisol on top, but people want more soft hand, and you get really good machines that you add to machine that you like to your presses that are called stampinators. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but like, no, I'm just playing. It's just like those machines are awesome, right?
Yeah.
You put your underbase, you hit your stampinator, then you flatten your base, and then you can pretty much mimic not as
far
soft.
Off. Yeah, it's not far off.
It's not far off than a true HSA or like a discharge base with plastisol on top. I mean, it helps tremendously.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's even there's new Teflons that go underneath, so it mats down the fibers as well at the same time, mats down the prints. I think that's the best investments we had. Even for like when we were printing water-based things, that machine is just so good for presses. And it makes your print look so much good, so much better.
It really does. And we always take print samples to shows with us, Long Beach Impressions Expo. We take print samples there, and we're always, showing them off and showing them. And we always got to make that caveat, okay?
Yeah.
This was done, finished with a stampinator, or the stampinator was your flash or something like that. Because I don't want to mislead anybody thinking, oh, you just print Monarch ink and you're going to get this, this beautiful, you don't have to change anything. Look at this. It's amazing, right? We want to, we all understand where plastisol has its shortcomings, what it can and can't do, what it's really good at and what it's not really good at. But like you said, if you can do things to get yourself as close as possible to sort of that water-based feel while making, while having everything else leading up to it, fewer screens, all the stuff that comes with plastisol versus water-based discussion. Is it worth it? And honestly, I tell everybody, if you have the ability to invest in a stampinator, invest in a stampinator. It is a good piece of equipment to have. It serves many, many, many purposes, not just with plastisol, but it really is. It's a good flash. It's a good finisher. There's a lot of things you can use it for to get you a really good, soft, vibrant result.
100%.
And a great tool for DTF. I mean, we just installed five or six more stampinators over at Avid. They bought one press strictly, literally to do DTF transfers, and we just installed a brand new Cobra there this week, and you threw them on that. So I mean, that was the easiest tool I think that most people could implement to really make sure you get a nice underbase to reduce the fibrillation. And I think it takes out of the level of experience that you need to pull off a really nice print. And I think it provides consistency across the board.
Yeah, the good thing about the stampinators, I tell everybody this, you can literally take it and place it in your exact process now, and your result will be better. There's just no doubt about it. You put it in exactly the way you're doing things right now, and your result will improve. That's pretty simple.
And you save a head. You don't need to have the flash and a roller, an engineering roller, whatever you decide to do. So especially for guys with smaller presses, it's a great way to kind of free up a color print head, right? So,
100%.
We had a podcast actually yesterday. It was out last week. This is going to be out in like 2 weeks with Chromaline, and they were talking about the never-ending R&D that they're doing to release new products, right? Are you guys currently working on anything yourself, like R&D wise? Also environmentally friendly. They have to respect like laws and things like that. So what's going on?
Yeah, so we're, like most people or most manufacturers, we're always looking to make our existing products better, come up with good products, find ways to offer solutions that we believe will make somebody's life easier or make the product better. Those are basically the two ways that we try to approach R&D. Okay, can we make the printer's job easier, and can we make the product better? With that said, talking about sort of hybrid printing, we are in the process of developing what we're calling a hybrid discharge. A lot of people no, I think Union's version is the Plasticharge is what they call it. It's basically similar to a water-based discharge. It has a little more screen openness to it, so you don't have as much of the humidity factor requirement. We are tailoring it in particular to work with our mixed colors from our PMS database. So the one thing that we want to do is make sure if somebody's doing a custom PMS color and using our hybrid discharge, that those two will work together and know that, okay, this application, this is going to work. We know it's going to work. So that should be coming very, very soon. We're probably going to do sort of a soft launch later this year, and then kind of, start giving out samples at Impressions Expo this year, or next year, actually 2025, so that people can try it. Hopefully be able to show them how it runs on press at Impressions Expo. So that's one thing that we've got in the works, and that's another way the print lab's really going to come sort of into play for us pretty early on, is being able to create that content to show people this is exactly how to make this work with our system from start to finish, and we'll show them, hey, you got your screens burned, you got everything set up, here's your press. All right, let's sit down and look at the art. Let's get our PMS colors. This is how we do it from start to finish. How easy it is to mix our PMS colors and how well they work with our new hybrid discharge. So that's one of our big offerings that's coming out. And when you look at what I talked about a little bit before, making our existing products a little bit better. So we do low temp inks. We're big players in the low temp game. That's how we started. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So what we wanted to do was take so right now ULT cures at 270 degrees, and our Apocalypse colors and our Yeti cures at 280 degrees. So 280 is that threshold. Anything under 290, you're good at not activating the dyes in the fabric, not going to have any dye migration or anything like that. So 280 is perfectly fine. But we wanted to kind of standardize that and make that, take that down from 270. So everything that we have in low temp is 270 degree cured. There's no question, can I take this down to 270? Because it does, people don't think about it, but when you run all day long, every single day, some people are running multiple shifts in their shop. You're running that dryer at 280 degrees. If you can drop 10 degrees over the course of a year, you're going to save yourself some money in electrical, Yeah. Your shop's not going to get as hot for my great customers down in Florida and the deep south of the United States, where it's, 98 degrees and 90% humidity. So, it's not moving the needle huge there, but there's, being able to standardize that, there's no question about it. It gives you that extra 10 degrees that you can get away with. And what I like to tell people is if they're thinking about going to low temp, or they have an application for where they think low temp is needed in their shop, go low temp. Go low temp. And if you need or want to cure them at 320 degrees, you want to cure them back at standard cure temp, then do that. Let that low temp sort of be your standard. And if you have an application where you think, okay, I need to cure this thing, I need to be 100% certain, then throw that thing to a standard cure. Don't go crazy with it. Don't throw it in 360 degrees for 2 minutes or anything like that. But keep it reasonable. But you can go back to standard cure with low cure inks. And that's one thing that we try to tell people, because you're always going to have sort of that, you're always going to have that application that pops up where you need, or you really want a low temp ink to be extra safe. And we don't know where these garments are coming from. A lot of times they're being shipped from overseas. We don't know how they're dyed. We don't know a lot of that part, when we order, and our shops don't know it either. So they order these garments that come from India or China, and we don't know how they're dyed. They sit in a container ship and absorb and soak up moisture for 2 months before they arrive in the United States, and then they cycle around the ports and all that stuff. So being able to cure at low temp is huge. We want one solid, consistent temperature across the board, and that's the two things that we're really working on right now.
That's awesome. And like, even
actually,
for us,
I want to dive into.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, sorry, I think there's a bit of a lag. Low temp is actually one of the topics I want to talk on, and I think we should dive in a little bit further. One thing that you'd mentioned with the discharge, which for me is very frustrating as a distributor. I don't know if it's possible, but one of the things that I kind of joke around with plastisol, and I think it was actually Kevin, my partner at RB Digital, who kind of brought it up once when I first joined, and we were looking at starting to get into screen printing more aggressively. When I started 6 years ago, we only had one screen print SKU, and when I say one SKU, I mean like for adhesives, for cleaners, for inks, for everything. We literally had in Ontario only 5-gallon of quick white.
Wow.
And that was because one of my clients, Arctic downtown, they love that white, and they just said, hey, please just stock this at all times. They've gone heavily into DTF now, and they're doing quite well with it. But one of the things that, Kevin had always said is like, when the world ends, we're going to have two things, cockroaches and plastisol. And from a distributor perspective, like I could have a weird, blue that's on the shelf that no one buys for like 5 years, and no one ever says like, hey, this plastisol ink is no good. But when it comes to like the discharge, there's such a short shelf life on this to the point where we don't stock it at every single location. We also used to carry 1 gallons and 5 gallons. And you have customers like Shawn, like one day they order 5 gallons and then they order 1 gallons for a month. And then the 5 gallons are going bad. And then I have to call, Printies, and I got to call Press Time, and I got to call, guys in Montreal and be like, hey, listen, no one for some reason stopped wanting the 1 gallons and now they only wanted 5 gallons. So I went to Jesse from Matsui, and I'm like, look, I'm only buying 1 gallons now. Give me a better price on the 1 gallons because I'm tired of like, having product go bad on the shelf and we don't know, like sometimes it lasts 14 months and sometimes it lasts 9 months. Right. And it depends on the temperature and how it's shipped. So I don't know if that's, you're working on discharge base. It would be awesome because like right now I stock all the Matsui out of Ontario and I only do it in 1 gallon. So we have constant fresh inventory that's getting turned over 60 days. Is that a limitation to creating a discharge and like having it stable to last that long? Like, is that just an industry problem that can't be fixed?
It's it's always going to be an aspect of discharge. That's always going to be something that has to be dealt with. Now, there are ways to improve it from a formulation standpoint. Hybrid discharge, in particular, being far more stable than just a pure water-based discharge. So you have a little longer shelf life, a little longer before the expiration date. But, unfortunately, that's just kind of the nature of the beast, honestly. And it is something that people have to factor in, especially, we deal with some water-based transfer inks or water-based flexo inks used in like a transfer application, and they always have to be, catalyzed. That's just the way that it works. And what happens to your pot life when you catalyze a water-based ink, you better use exactly what you've catalyzed or you're going to be throwing it away. So it's definitely, there are ways to improve it. There are ways we can make it better, and we are working on that. But, it's not going to be plastisol. When we first started making plastisol inks here, we kept the very first gallon that we ever made, and we kept it here, and we still have it here to this day. And, we've had a little bit of viscosity rise on it. That was late 2016. But you can still print with it today. I mean, it's just a white, and you can still print with it today. It's never going to get there. It's not going to be anything like that. Water-based is not going to be anything like that just because of the, the tendency to separate. It just doesn't have the suspension. But, I mean, you better be doing discharge as like press time, as your primary method of printing to know that you need a 5-gallon bucket of discharge. That better be what you do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you should be buying in gallons or lower or quarts.
Yeah. And it's not only discharge. I mean, we've also seen the low cure inks, like low cure poly inks. In the beginning, again, I just, I was building up this massive catalog of products. Like right now, I feel like we stock like everything and anything that anybody needs for screen printing. Whenever somebody says, hey, I need this, I'll look into it, and I usually end up bringing it on. And Kevin's kind of like, oh, this is crazy. Like, why just bring on so much foil? And then I had a client, T-shirt Elephants, was like, hey, I'm going to order 60 rolls of this. And it's like, okay, it's worth bringing on the whole line, right? So I kind of get carried away. I always want to have everything that my customers need. Yeah. So when I started, and during the pandemic, that's when we kind of got introduced. And like we went crazy. Like we knew that the supply chain was going to be an issue. We kind of found you, and we rented the space next door, which was like 3,500 square feet. And I filled it up with your plastisol, and I still have some of it. Like I have 5 gallons of like a neon mixing color.
Yeah.
You know, I tried getting you to get rid of it. I'm like, and you're like, Zach, you just ordered so much of it. Like I can't even take these packs. But anyways, that being said, you know, we bought a lot of the low cure stuff, and we quickly saw like, you know, after 9 months or a year, it kind of started to stiffen up a little bit and needed a lot more to get worked. So that's something else that we kind of also realized, like, hey, we don't want to have the low cure ink sitting for so long, and then we start to consolidate. So instead of having like, you know, 4 low cure poly inks, we said, okay, we're gonna have 2. You know what I mean? Again, just to constantly be turning it over.
Yeah.
And again, what we try and do is, you know, we don't want, let's say, our Vancouver location that may not be turning over inventory as often to buy from you guys, because then it'll sit there for 2 years.
Yeah.
So we bring everything into either Toronto or Montreal, and then with weekly transfers, we kind of send out the low cure stuff. So we've had to really adjust the way that we purchase and the way logistically that we move product around so that it's always fresh. I mean, we want our customers to always get fresh product. Last thing people need is they have a big job, you know, they're printing on Friday, it's due on Monday to get picked up, and then they're like, oh man, Zach, I got like, you know, I heard 4 or 5 gallons, and like they're really hardened up, and it's gonna be a really tough weekend. So we try and really avoid that. But yeah, continue on the topic of low cure and standard cure. You know, when we came into the industry, and when I say that, I don't mean like 160 years ago when our business started, but when we started really taking screen printing seriously, you know, we wanted to bring something different. And again, this is going back 6.5 years. And at that time, when I spoke with, you know, at the time was Poly One, which is now Avient, you know, we're a Wilflex distributor, which is under that umbrella.
Yep.
They said like, hey, like low cure is the shit now. Like that's what's going to be the differentiator. And no one in Canada was really pushing the low cure stuff. And that really helped us like make a name for ourselves in terms of like bringing in a product. And the Real system was what we had, and it did really well, and it still does well. And, you know, some of the statistics that Avient gave us were actually, you know, really shocking and opened the discussion with my shops, because, you know, it's more expensive, obviously. Standard cure to low cure, you know, I guess the raw materials are costing you, let's say, an extra 20 or 25%, or even 30%, and then that translates to an extra 20 or 30% on pricing to the end user. And our customers would say like, okay, well, cool, you're saying it's good ink, but like, why am I going to spend an extra 25 or 30%? And I remember there was a presentation that they gave us, and it said like, you know, and this is an average in the U.S. in terms of savings. Obviously, every state is different, and natural gas will be different than electric, and one state's can be really cheap with one method over the other. But they'd said on average, you know, every single flash that you run in your shop, if you dial that down for low cure, you're saving $250 US per flash. So a year, USD. So, you know, if you're a shop that has 20 flashes, like, wow, that's a lot of savings. And then another one that they told us was, I believe it was for every 30 degrees that you would drop your oven temp, and your oven was, don't quote me, but it was like either 8 or 10 feet, would save you about $10,000 per 30 degrees per dryer. And when you tell that to customers, it's like, wow, you know, yes, I'm paying more for the ink, okay, but just on hydro alone, there's savings. But then you have the enhanced opacity. You know, they had another stat, and I don't remember exactly what it was, don't quote me, but it was like, if you drop your oven temp by 60 degrees, as you know, most shops are not AC temperature and humidity controlled. I spent the entire week going around with Sati, and like I felt like I was in a sweatshop all this week because temperatures were hitting like 50 degrees Celsius. Like my knees were sweating, which I didn't even know was possible for my knees to sweat. Right. So you have the savings of high. And basically what they're saying is, hey, if you drop your oven temp 60 degrees, your ambient temperature for everyone else is going to drastically come down, which means they're more comfortable, which means they're going to produce more. You know, they might produce an extra 14%. So you have the savings in hydro, you have the increased productivity, you have the less heat-related scrap, so you're going to get less scorching of garments, right? It just seems like there's so many reasons to go low cure. And if someone could, you know, be open-minded and not be like, okay, well, a 5-gallon of standard cure is $350, low cure is $550. That's an extra $200. And when I look at, I buy 60 of these a year, that's a lot of money. But when you start calculating all these things, like, hey, industry average is 18,000 impressions on a 5-gallon pail. So you're talking about a fraction of a cent per print. And then if the low cure is 20, 30%, you talk about a fraction of a penny. It begins to become a no-brainer. Like, why is everyone not going low cure?
Yep.
So what I'm getting into is when you look at all this, it seems like so obvious that low cure is the way to go for most shops. Are there some disadvantages to low cure? Is there the perfect candidate for low cure? Is it everybody? And are there some shops that should stick to standard cure because it might improve their process?
So, yeah, I mean, you're 100% spot on. When you break all the information down, switching over to low cure, it's easy. Everybody looks at a price of a 5-gallon bucket and they're like, okay, well, it's $20 more. This is $30 more. And you like you touched on, you talk to them and you say, okay, how much of that is actually going onto the garment? Is this costing you 1 penny more to make this than going the other direction for a very worst product? Okay, can you pass that 1 penny on to your customer? Of course you can. They're never going to notice. You double it, triple it. Go to 5 cents, whatever you want to do. But they're never going to notice. You're going to get a better product. You're going to have a much higher chance that customer then comes back to you and purchases again, because what most people do, if they go and they, buy a shirt and they wear it once, they wear it twice, they wear it 3 times, okay, you're probably in the clear as a screen printer. By that 5th time, say it washes out or you have latent dye migration because their dryer is on whatever setting that it might be on, we call those basically, quiet quitters. People who next time they buy shirts, they're not coming back to you. They're going to somebody else because they were outside of that window where they could complain, or they felt like that they could complain, but they saw something that was an issue to them, and you're never going to know that. You're never going to hear that. You're never going to have that complaint. You're just going to assume that customer didn't come back because they didn't need anything else. So if you can go, to low temp for something that's more expensive, you save on energy costs. You have a less hot environment, like you talked about. Your ambient temperature's down. People are more comfortable. They're going to do better. You're also going to run less of a risk of having a latent issue down the line. Because what most people think happens with dye migration is you throw it through a dryer, and as soon as it comes out the other end, the dye is coming through. That's not always the case, and most of the time that's not the case. It's after you've packed it, you've folded it, you've stuck it into the boxes, you've taped it up, and they've come and picked it up, or you've shipped it out and they get it and they're like, what the hell? This is, this white ink is now red, or it's pink, or whatever it is. And if you could have caught it within the first 10 shirts because it happened right on the end of the dryer, okay, great. You can probably fix that application. But that's where it can save you, not just money, but it can bring you repeat business. It can avoid that business going somewhere else who knows how to print. So sure, you're paying a little more for the product or a little more for the ink, but you're doing all these other things that are saving you time, saving you money, saving you returns, saving you reprints, all that stuff. So, most shops are candidates for low temp. And the reasons that you might not go to low temp are, wet on wet printing is not quite the same as it is in a standard cure temp ink. Because what do you do when you do wet on wet printing, or you do simulated process or something like that? You preheat the pallets, right? You go through a cycle where you preheat the pallets so that when the ink gets down there, it already starts the cure process. That makes your wet on wet printing much easier. You do that with low temp, that pallet comes up, touches the back of the screen. You might start to have a little bit of curing in the screen over time, especially if you get runs where you're doing 200, 300, 500 plus shirts, something like that. You might run into that issue there. So there's ways around it. Adding a cooling station, so you run like two or three colors in a row, wet on wet cooling station, then another couple colors in a row. There's things that you can do, but again, you've kind of limited yourself there, right, on your press. You have removed, if you've got to have a cooling station, you've removed one possible head or one possible color. Another thing you can do is buy an extra flash. So instead of having a cooling station, maybe you flash there, and just a quick flash, maybe 2 seconds. So by the time it gets around to the next one, everything's set. You can increase your off contact a little bit, print a little easier there, so you don't have as much, touching. But yeah, there's definitely, that's the major downside to low temp. Something that, if you're not a super experienced printer and you're trying to get into wet on wet printing, that's going to give you a bit of a headache. But there are ways to do it. It's all, like you said, it's all down to your shop too. I've got people using low temp inks in New York, and I've got people using low temp inks in Florida. Okay, these are very different environments, and they might call me and say, I could call both of them today and say, okay, set your press up like this, set your configuration up like this, set your colors up in this order, run this exact same job, and they're going to get 2 different results. Yeah. And that is a little bit of a challenge with low temp, because I can't just come out and tell you, okay, run it exactly like this, and then that'll work in Lakeland, Florida, where it's 98 degrees and 90% humidity. Run it like this, and that'll run perfectly well in, Bangor, Maine, when it's in the middle of winter and it's 2 degrees outside, So those kind of things are something to keep in mind. And I tell everybody, I don't care what shop you are, if you're low temp, if you're standard temp, whatever you are, get a donut probe. Make sure that that your temperature of your dryer is what you expect it to be. Because most people, I would even argue, don't do sufficient maintenance or cleaning on their dryers. So they have it set, and then 2 months down the road, where they were running at 320 degrees, suddenly they're only getting, 315 or maybe 305. And that number starts creeping down and creeping down and creeping down. And don't use a laser gun. Don't do that. Get a donut probe. It can save you so much time, so much headache. It can save you a return. One return, and it'll pay for itself. And it'll tell you exactly the temperature that's getting down to that garment. So if your cure is 280 degrees and you set it at 280 degrees, you're in the clear. Because, you don't want to undercure. With low cure, you don't want to undercure. It's the same as anything else. You're going to have washout, you're going to have crock, you're going to have all those issues. So, you don't want to undercure, and especially if you're trying to avoid dye migration, you don't want to overcure either. So know what your dryer temperature is. Don't leave it up to question. Don't leave it up to guessing. Don't just, that feels cured. That's fine. Make sure you know.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Like, if there's 3 tools, there's lots of tools that you could bring in, but if there's 3, it's exposure calculator, which 90% of shops don't have. And then whenever I tell them, hey, they're having issues, use exposure problem solved. Yeah, they're $20. Like, if you're trying out an emulsion, I'll give you one for free.
Right. I
got to be careful with that. Now I'm going to have like 60 customers like, hey, I'm reaching out for my free exposure calculator with a new emulsion. But
Monarch
anyways,
Podcast, here's the code.
Yeah, exactly. We actually, we're going to hold Monarch. He's going to send us a bunch of
free
package of Monarch branded exposure calculators. So exposure calculator, tension meter, and donut probe. And, we have Avid. He maybe about 3 months ago or 3 months ago, he now, part of his daily process every single day is he runs the donut probe through every single dryer. So he can make any adjustments that he needs to. I don't know why he started implementing that. Maybe there was a job that didn't cure properly. He runs low cure. He wants to keep it as low as possible. And, he's got maintenance. I think it's like every 3 months he has the chimney stacks that are kind of cleaned out, right? To take off all that lint.
Yeah.
Now that might be, you think about it, with a standard cure, the dryers are a lot hotter, and maybe it's kind of burning off some of that excess lint. Whereas with low cure, maybe it's not. So maybe that's something that he has to do a little bit more maintenance for. But for him, he's seen that it's 100% worth it, and it makes sense for him, right?
Yeah, it's such an easy thing to do every single day to save yourself the potential for an intense issue or bad headache. It's so. You come in, flip your dryers on, let them get up to temp, run it through there, adjust. There you go. You're done.
Boom. Yeah, exactly. And one other thing that you had touched on was, the prints look okay coming out of the dryer. And then we know what most shops do. They're not airing these shirts out one at a time. They're, hot stacking them.
Then
they're putting them into a box in their already very hot shop. and then the dye migration process is just going to continue. And, what I tell a lot of shops, anyone that's struggling with dye migration or everyone in general, like we have these Vastex air bars that literally are a bunch of fans on a little air bar, and it sits at the back of the dryer and just cools down that ink as quick as possible. So there's no more tackiness and get rid of the heat stack. M&R has their own version, the M&R Twister, same thing, goes in the back. But that is also a very small investment, a couple grand, that's going to prevent you from, again, just having that one bad job on the red poly where it gets to customers and it's the white inks turned pink. So that's another little bit of a little recommendation that I would say, hey, kind of give that a shot. So
yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah. So Ian, I want to kind of transition to another topic. Thanks for covering the low cure, standard cure. It's a constant, ongoing topic. So it's great to create content like this because I could just tell them, hey, watch this podcast, and I don't have to sit there and regurgitate the same thing over and over again, which I've had to do today alone with a client for about 45 minutes on the phone. So we got introduced to you guys, as I mentioned, during the pandemic when we were scrambling to find alternating suppliers. Our supply chain was severely affected. Most distributors had to basically give everybody a budget, and our budget was very low. I mean, my monthly budget could be consumed by one heavy user. So I basically started looking for, as big of a supplier with a reputable product that I could find that wasn't owned by one of these other massive companies. That being said, if you look at that, did COVID-19 almost act as like a catalyst for you guys to really blow up and have the opportunity to get into new accounts? Because I'm sure we weren't the only ones that fell, into this category. And also, how has business continued after the pandemic? You guys are going against some of the, gorillas in the industry. You got Avient, which is Wilflex, Union, Rutland, Triangle, Aquarius, Magna. They acquired Magna. It seems like, any good ink manufacturer that gets some legs, they go and buy them out. And it might happen to you too. You might get picked up in 3, 4, 5 years and get acquired by the, the big dog. So how do you deal with that? How do you, and I know you kind of touched on that about, we're trying to be bringing something new to the market, improving it and making it less expensive. But, how do you deal with, what did you see during the pandemic? Did that growth continue? And how has that shifted now? Because inventory is not an issue anymore. I submit an order with Avient and I'm going to get it in, a couple weeks, right? So it's quick, whereas before it was months. So how are you dealing with that on a day-to-day?
Yeah, I think, COVID, the pandemic really had everybody reevaluate the way they did things. So before that, if you were a Rutland user, you used Rutland. Like that's it. Now you bought Rutland and you just bought it every time and you never thought about it. When, supply chain issues started to hit, and we weren't immune to it. We had the same problems, obviously not quite to the scale that, Avient had it, because Avient's much larger than us. So, they had a little bit tougher time with it. But, when that happened, everybody was just like, okay, well, we got to get something that prints. Just give us something. I don't care who it is. Just give us something. And then when we could still, ship in a reasonable time frame, and of course it took us a long time. It's, everybody was in the same boat. It still took us a long time, but people was like, okay, well, we were using Wilflex or we were using One Stroke or something like that. We still need that quality. We need that level. So let's try Monarch out if we can get it. Let's get on board with them and let's see if this works and we can put it into our application. So we did have a pretty significant boom during that time period, and something that's, I think, still going on. And when it was happening, it was my guess is, most people don't want to go back to being at the mercy of a single supplier, because you just never know what's going to happen. And we saw back in 2020 how things can flip on a dime, and then all of a sudden, you are not able to print. You're not able to meet your customers' demands because you didn't have enough products qualified or know how to use them or know how to make them work. So even waiting, a month or two to get them in, and then suddenly, from that point, you've got to learn how to print them again. So pushing that even further out. So that is something that's still going on. I've seen shops that have reverted back to the kind of the old way. They like what they like. We're on the other side of it. Let's just move back to how we were doing things. But most shops that I go into these days, they have multiple manufacturers in there, and it's not like it used to be where it was even if they had multiple, it was 90% one, 10% of another. Now that split is more like, okay, we got 50% of this manufacturer and 30% of this manufacturer and 20% of this manufacturer. So it really had people sort of reevaluate the way that, and it was us too. Same with raw materials. What we use to manufacture our products, we did the same thing. We've got raw materials qualified in several different avenues from all sorts of different countries, because you never know when a trade embargo might come in, or a tariff, or whatever it might be. On the front end, you guys don't have to worry about that quite as much, because Canada and the United States, we ship pretty well with each other, and but on our end, we do get products that come from overseas. We do get products that come from the Asian countries or Europe or whatever. So, making sure that we have an avenue to get good, solid supplies of materials from each one of those places in case something goes south or in case something goes off the rails, is something that we had to consider as well, and something that we still practice to this day. So, we did see a pretty significant boom, and at that time, we got with the Shirt Show. We sponsored their podcast for a little while. Aaron was on one of their episodes early on. They did a ton for us. That was some of the best marketing that we've ever had. Dylan is to this day still using our products up there at Upstate Merch. They got a great shop, good social media presence. But I don't think, I don't know this for sure, but I don't know that they would have gotten on Monarch had it not been for that time. Not being able to get product elsewhere, or looking to partner with kind of the new guy in town or whatever. And we've got several customers like that. RB, we might not have ever hooked up Zack if it hadn't happened. Maybe we would have, maybe we wouldn't have. But that was the catalyst in a lot of ways for us to not only get the distributors that we currently have, but for them to get more business with their customers as well. Because like I said, everybody wants to have multiple options to be able to make sure that their shop's going to stay open if something goes wrong. And it also forced people to finally try new products. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is all we can get, so let's try low temp. If that's all we can get, let's try low temp and see what happens.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a catalyst, and it's something that we're still seeing the effects of today. And I think something that, we're going to continue seeing down the road.
Yeah. And I think just the way that it was a catalyst for you guys, it was a catalyst for us. I mean, we took that leap of faith during the pandemic when all our competitors were cutting back on POs, laying off the sales guys. We took an alternate approach. We really thought about it. And, a lot of this comes down to the mindset of my partner, Kevin. He had mentioned something about, I don't remember exactly, but it was something to do with one of the recessions, and, there was Kellogg's and then one of the other big cereal companies, which I don't remember exactly which one it was. And during the pandemic, one of the cereal companies basically pulled back, and I believe it was Kellogg's that went full force, started marketing like crazy. And they took that huge during that recession, and they never lost that. And that's how it worked for us. Like, we took that leap of faith, and we said, hey, everyone's going to run out of ink here. So let's do something crazy. Let's negotiate with the neighbor next door to take over his lease, because he's not busy. He's shut down. Yeah. And we ordered like several years worth of ink. I mean, when I sent the order to you and even Aaron, I remember him being like, hey, is this an accurate PO? Like, you're just,
is this real?
Firing. Yeah, is this real? Like, nobody else is ordering. And, Avient did the same thing, and all our suppliers. But it got to the point where we were the only guys in town, literally in Canada, that actually had ink. It got so bad, my competitors, their clients are freaking out, saying, I've been buying ink from you for 10 years. Like, what do? I can't produce. Yeah. And they were like, okay, like, check out RB Digital. And then just like trying a new ink, some customers might have never heard from us. Again, screen printers are creatures of habit. They don't go to a lot of the shows, the old school guys. Mm-hmm. They're not on social media. They don't see what's out there. And they're like, oh, who's RB Digital? And then they go on our website and like, wow, they have a massive product offering, 6 locations. Okay, let me try. Wow, they have ink. I buy today, gets delivered tomorrow. This is awesome. Yep. And we kind of took we leapfrogged our competitors and we held that stance. And yeah, it's definitely makes sense that happened to you guys. I think that, for sure, you probably got into some distributors that you were never able to work with, right? So,
yeah, because when that happened, we were still new. We were very new. Like that was just basically 2 years into us having any market presence at all. So, when we started getting calls and, from you guys, from some of our distributors here, and we started getting calls, from customers, tons and tons of calls from customers. Do you guys have anything? Can you give me anything? Can you do anything? And, the way we're set up, we don't sell direct. We can't sell direct. We're not going to sell direct, sell through distributors. But it definitely showed, from March, specifically in the United States, from March of 2020 until probably July, everybody was like, what's going to happen? Where are we going to go from here? Is there going to be demand? Are we going into a recession? Like what is going to happen? And at the first sign that things started to kind of pick back up, we were like, okay, buy all the material. The people are staying home. They're online shopping. They're going to be buying shirts. They're going to be buying this. Let's bring in all the raw material. Just bring it in, and let's just start making this stuff. And that served us well for a while. Obviously, we didn't buy inventory through 2022, and everything was just insane. But it was definitely you had the right mentality there. It's one of those ones it's really scary because if it backfires in a big way. But that was something that really helped you guys. It really helped us, and it worked out.
Yeah, and I think like the leap of faith that you're taking now with the print lab and the content you're going to make, I think this is pretty much the next step to go and play in the big leagues, like with those whales, right? It's hard for them to move and take decisions like that. And I think, Zach, you're kind of seeing with RB, right? It's a lot easier to do a podcast and educate the industry than to go and make videos about every single machine and inks and things that you supply, because you have a freaking large company, right? Mm-hmm. But like with Ian and you making that and being the next pretty much Ryanet, what they were doing 10, 15 years ago, I think that's like the next statement, right? It brings a lot of confidence and brings a lot of education, and it just brings something that if you bring trust to the industry, people are going to want to try it out, right? Yep. Even though you're just teaching me because you don't care if I buy your product, you just want people to make good prints. At the end of the day, why would I not support you if you're helping me? Mm-hmm. Right? So maybe that's something you didn't even think about, but that's what I like right now. I want to buy.
Yeah. Right. It's what you talk about. One of the big things is people love, seeing what a company is like, seeing what they're doing, seeing sort of the inner workings of them. And even if it's just listening to me talk about, some dumbass shit that I'm going to talk about for that day on press, that people like that, right? 100%. People like to get to know what a company is and who a company is. And, being a smaller company, we're a little more agile and a little more able to do that sort of thing. So, we want to offer solutions and offer education, because even if you don't buy from us right now, that's fine. I just hope your process is better. And then maybe one time down the road, you'll need something and we will have an option for you. We will have a solution, or we will fit into your product mix. And it's all about, like I talked about before, offering solutions for our customers, offering solutions for Zack, so he doesn't have to make all these videos and educate all these different customers and all of his salesmen and all that stuff. Make your life easier. So now you have an easy product to sell. You have to do less work. You're more likely to want to sell that product because you don't have to put in quite the amount of effort that you otherwise would have.
100%. You're a distributor and you have the option to choose two ink manufacturers. Are you going to choose the one that's going to help you sell your products and it's going to make it easier for sales? Like, I think hats off to you guys for doing that and investing the money in the print lab. I think it's something that's amazing, and it's a investment that you're going to see in the future. It might not reap tomorrow, but I think 10 years on the road, it's going to be the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Think so. I 100% agree. And when we first started talking about this, I was like, okay, this is, like you said, it's not going to be tomorrow. We're not going to get this back, in a day or a week or a year even, but this is going to be something we're building ourselves for the future, right? We've 100%. Got a long way to go to take over some of the market from the bigger guys and do the things that we want to do. But this is a long play that we're really excited about, because at least in the short term, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm excited to start using the inks.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
And don't forget samples. I'm expecting some red
Got a
Nike
whole-
poly shirts with
Yeah.
print flash,
Whole-
print yellow.
Dude,
And
we're gonna have everything.
Okay, great. I want 5 or 6 sample packs, one for each office. We could take around to customers, and even that it takes a lot of time and energy. You know, like Avient, they they created this really cool booklet of all their special effects, and it's just like a little catalog, and we show the customers when you flip, and like you'd be shocked like how much that return on investment was for them when we got that. Like it just really helped people be able to like see and touch the samples and then feel comfortable ordering. So I'm very excited for you guys. It's really cool. It shows obviously your commitment to the industry.
Yep.
I hope that it goes really well for you. I had a great time during this podcast. I learned a lot.
Fun.
Yeah, it was good.
That was great, guys.
Chatting shop. It's definitely a good way to end off the week and dive into a long weekend. So thank you very much, Ian. We
Absolutely
appreciate the time you've taken, and thanks for being a great partner of RB Digital and showing up today on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's been awesome. Really enjoyed it.
All right, take care, everyone.
See
Ciao.
ya.